Ever since the birth of cinema, there have been many major events that have shaped movies as we know it. From the pioneer era, when everything was an experiment on how to best use this newfound tool of storytelling, to the introduction of sound and color that shaped the golden age of cinema, to CGI that can be seen in almost all of the blockbusters that we have today. And during these moments of history, we can clearly see the rise and fall of certain types of movies and genres. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at what could be considered the era we live in today and what could possibly be its fall, the superhero era. Superhero movies and TV shows aren't something new. You can wind the tape back pretty far and still find the same heroes on screen as we see today. These types of films have always existed, but in the 2000s superhero films started to take off to a whole new level, and by the 2010s it absolutely dominated the box office and started to take over the streaming services as well, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. But just like any other era in history, it must come to an end, right? In order to try to understand this better, we have to look back at other major eras in cinema history and compare. And there's two types of genres that I would like to show you a bit more. Just like the superheroes, Western movies have always been there, dating back to 1899, which is around the time the real Wild West ended, depending on how you want to look at it. And Western movies kept on being made, and later became more of a period piece than contemporary, but it wasn't until the late 40s to 50s that the golden age of Western began. That same shift could be seen in TV series as well, once television became more popular. By 1959, there were 26 Western TV shows airing during primetime. But the Westerns weren't just Westerns, as in a single genre. They had more to it than that. Just like superhero movies, the Westerns came in many flavors, namely their subgenres. You had comedy, horror, martial arts, science fiction, musicals, and many more. Even subgenres that indicated the origins of the films, such as spaghetti western, Osten or red western, even lingonberry western. The same can be seen in superhero movies, since it's more than just its own genre. You have everything from heist movies to noir and space opera. It's a smorgasbord with many flavors. But they still have one thing in common that makes them superhero movies, just like the Westerns made them Westerns. Western movies didn't die out, and most likely never will, since we can see them on screen even today, both in their familiar settings and in a setting that more fits one of the subgenres. Westerns are here to stay, but due to market saturation and generic exhaustion, the era nevertheless ended. Ever since the introduction of sound to cinema in the late 1920s, musicals have been a big thing. And just like the Westerns, musicals too had its own golden age between the 1930s to the 1950s. Even during the 60s, with big-budget movies such as The Sound of Music and West Side Story, among others, the musical genre still showed that it was a force to be reckoned with. It was too big to fail. The musicals became larger and more expensive, but during the late 1960s and early 70s, the musical era ended. It wasn't profitable enough to do musicals. The audience craved for something else, something more mature. The landscape changed and more foreign films appeared in the US, and it opened up for other types of films to be made that were more avant-garde. And this is very much comparable to the times we are living in now. The budgets of superhero movies and TV shows have gone up, but the return for each individual movie have gone down. The Westerns and the musicals are just two eras out of many that we have seen in cinema history. There are more like them. these types of movies didn't vanish completely, but the peak when they were at their highest are gone. And that brings us to today, to the superhero era, where we produce more superhero movies and TV shows than ever before. In 2015, Steven Spielberg said that there will be a time when the superhero movie goes the way of the Western. It doesn't mean that there won't be another occasion where the Western comes back and the superhero movie someday returns. And in 2022, Quentin Tarantino said, "Just as 60s anti-establishment auteurs rejoiced when studio musical adaptations fell out of favor, today's filmmakers can't wait for the day they can say that about superhero movies." Just like during the Western and musical era, the superhero era keeps pumping out more and more movies every year. And there's no shortage of characters and stories to pick from. There's literally thousands of characters in the Marvel and DC universe combined that still have not yet made it to the screen. The unexpected success with Blade, which could be seen as the birth of the golden age of superheroes, paved the way for X-Men and Spider-Man, and eventually Nolan's Batman and Favreau's Iron Man. With this came the shared universe, and eventually everyone wanted one of their own. But if that's the beginning, then what would be the pinnacle of the superhero era, and what would mark the end? To find that answer, I believe we have to look at the company that produces the most number of superhero movies and TV series. Because unlike many of the other eras in the past, the superhero era pretty much comes down to one company: Marvel. Western and musicals were both something that any studio could come up with, even though musicals often relied on a bigger budget and bigger stars. But the superhero genre relies more on one single entity. Even though Marvel aren't alone in making these kinds of movies, they are the biggest player on the field. Other companies just don't seem big or impactful enough to make a big change. What Marvel created with their shared universe and a storyline that would span over a decade is unmatched. But with it, there also comes some downsides. The shared universe makes it harder for reboots to happen. Instead, other characters within said universe will take over the spot if a major character dies or if an actor retires. These new characters don't get the same build-up as many of the originals. They don't start out from scratch, and we don't really get an origin story. They are instead directly placed into the shared universe and are meant to join the others directly. It makes it harder for the audience to connect and really care about them, compared to someone that they have followed for many years, who have struggled in order to become who and where they are now. They will just continue on an already started path set by another and will maybe get their own feature or TV show later on that will explain their backstory better. If Blade was the birth of the superhero era, with Batman and Iron Man putting it in high gear, I would place the peak with the story that Marvel so carefully planned out with their original characters, with the very top ending with Avengers Endgame. It will be hard to outperform this build-up that they so carefully laid out in the past, and whatever they choose to do next in order to top that will always be compared to this moment in Marvel's history. The fall of this era is up to Marvel and how they decide to manage their own product. In a survey made between November 2021 and July 2022, we can see a shift in how the audience receives superhero movies. This shows what could be seen as an oversaturated market and audience fatigue. This means we could already be in the decline of this era as we speak. What Marvel has created would shape cinema history forever, but not everything can be a hit, and not everything can attract a large scale of followers. And this doesn't mean that the era of superheroes will end tomorrow, or even in a couple of years from now. It might not even end 10 years from now. And it certainly doesn't mean it will vanish forever. These kinds of movies will still be here. with the occasional comeback that will bring us back to the glory of a previous era. But if history has taught us anything, it will come to an end. I hope you enjoyed the video. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. Oh, and one more thing. Causing mayhem without any real consequences.